Let me start by introducing myself. I will be running your penetration testing breach and risks webinar. Um, I'm Angie, your friendly neighborhood Microsoft security architect. In general, I do security architecture, but I have a focus on Microsoft. That's been where the bulk of my experience is. I've been working in IT for the last 12 years and in cybersecurity for the last 5. Um, Today we're going to be talking about pen testing, why it's important, what the differences between pen testing and vulnerability assessments are, the costs versus benefits, what a breach is, the result of, maybe not getting pen tests done at your organization, the remediation costs of a breach, and we're going to take a look at some real world impacts of what those breaches have done. So, pen testing is similar to vulnerability assessment in that it looks for gaps in your security posture, but we actually try to exploit them with a professional. A big difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessments are that vulnerability assessments are just scanned by a machine. Pen testing is done by a person that has knowledge of organizations such as yours and how to exploit and leverage different vulnerabilities. And then they can pivot. If something that doesn't work for them comes up, they pivot and they try a new way to breach your organization. So this would simulate real world cyber attacks. And based off of the successes of the pen tester, we would provide recommendations to fix those issues that are very specific to your organization's infrastructure. Pen tests are important because the landscape for cybersecurity is changing. A study by CrowdStrike, a annual leader in cybersecurity protection, shows that these metrics are something that we're looking at now as what the landscape is. So it's 150% increase in China nexus activity across all sectors. That means that Chinese actors are targeting all businesses, not just government organizations, to cause chaos and to breach and steal information. 442% growth in phishing operations between the first and second half of 2024. This means phishing is specifically targeted phishing attacks for VIPs in organizations, leaders like CEOs, CFOs, CTOs. They're the ones being targeted because they're usually the ones with the higher level of access and also the higher level of important data. The fastest breach recorded last year was 51 seconds. That's how long it took to break into a large organization. 79% of these detections were malware-free. That means that most of these were socially engineered. And 26 newly named adversaries were found in 2024. Newly named adversaries means that these are hacker groups. So these are brand new groups, 26 new groups out there trying to steal data, break into organizations, and then sell that data for profit. 52% of these vulnerabilities observed by CrowdStrike were related to initial access. That means that these are all related to social engineering and how people are able to steal your data based off of how they get into your accounts. Now, I spoke about this a little bit a moment ago, but the difference between a vulnerability scan and pen testing is really that these are for vulnerability scans are for hygiene and pen testing tests real business impact. But it is important to note that vulnerability scans and pen tests are complementary. This comparison chart can give you some ideas of the differences between the goals method and the frequency that you should be looking at for vulnerability assessments and pen testing. Some important things to note about the vulnerability assessment versus the pen testing is that a vulnerability assessment would be run continuously. If you're one of our vCISO clients, we usually do these on a biweekly cadence. so we can address and roadmap the fixes for your vulnerabilities. But pen tests should really be done annually or biannually. That's because we use the information from vulnerability assessments to roadmap the fixes in your organization, and then we pen test to get the real world impact of those fixes. So let's talk about a breach. A breach is when an attacker successfully bypasses the in-place security measures of your organization. What does that actually mean for you? That means that it is somebody that was able to break into your email and download your data. That means that it's somebody that was able to log into your computer with a application like TeamViewer, which is a screen sharing, which is a free screen sharing application. That could also mean that someone was able to steal your information while you were using public Wi-Fi because they had a scanner that scanned for the information that's transmitted to and from your computer. The costs of remediation for breaches can be quite extensive. The loss of business during downtime, containment efforts, incident response, forensic investigation, system cleanups, and the increased cost of cyber insurance. Employee education post-breach as well. These are all different things that I've listed here as bullet points, and these are all things that I've seen in my experience that organizations, big and small, have had to deal with post-breach. When you look at these bullet points, they might not mean a whole lot in the moment, but when we compare them to breaches that we see in the wild, we see IBM, for example, a large organization, it cost them $4.8 million when they I'm sorry, IBM estimates that a breach costs $4.8 million a year on average for an organization. PurpleSec estimates that small businesses could see a loss of 120K to 1.24 million if they're impacted by a breach. If we go back to that previous slide, that's the accumulated cost of those things that I mentioned in those bullet points. Real world examples are like MGM Resorts, right? They had $100 million worth of losses, according to the Associated Press, when their hotel system went down. Heartland Payment Systems, this is back when cybersecurity was just first becoming a thought for a lot of organizations. They lost $12.6 million, according to Wired. TJ Maxx lost $100 million when their payment systems were breached and credit card data was leaked for millions of Americans. And the biggest one, National Public Data, in my opinion, they only lost $3.5 million, according to Forbes. But theirs is one of the most impactful because National Public Data is a data broker, meaning that they have the information of millions of Americans that is now just floating around on the internet for anybody to use. That means that your emails, your personal information, they're out there, making you a more likely target for a breach of your own organization. So I'd like for you guys to do some homework, either by yourselves or while I'm walking you through this, to just kind of calculate what the cost of a breach could be for you. If you take your annual revenue and you convert it to your daily revenue, and let's say that you guys are breached and you multiply that by 5, if you add legal costs and forensic costs, that would be what the cost of a breach would look like for your organization. An example for a business that has $5 million of annual revenue, 5 days of loss is $68,000 in revenue. Legal and forensic costs on average will cost a small business around $30,000. That is $100,000 worth of expenses in the cost of a breach. The cost of a pen test, it varies, but for our organization, they start at $10,000. But it can vary depending on the complexity of your infrastructure and the scope of the breach, meaning how deep into your infrastructure we dig and how big, how many servers, how many endpoints you have. But the return on investment on a pen test includes preventing the cost of a breach and reducing the risk of downtime and reputation loss. So some key takeaways I want you guys to think about is I want you to always combine approaches when you're assessing your security posture. There's no one solid solution for preventing breaches in your organization. When you do these breaches, you always want, or when you do these pen tests, you always want to prioritize assets with the highest risk and highest blast radius. Maybe you guys have an old legacy server that isn't necessarily connected to your network. We don't, we do worry about that, and we will secure it the best we can. But what we will look at more importantly is like your domain controller, if you have one in a hybrid setup, or your file share server. Those are the big ones, or your cloud app, the security of your SharePoint server as well. Um, those are the things that we would look at because those would have the highest blast radius, meaning that the effects of having those breached would ripple through your organization. You want to perform pen tests periodically. These are not the sorts of things that you do once and then you can say that you've marked it off a list for your organization. The cybersecurity landscape changes every quarter, sometimes every month, with new techniques and new tactics that are coming out, and it's easier every day with AI to perform some of these activities. So you always want to make sure that you're continuously running vulnerability scans, and you want to do your pen tests biannually or annually to make sure that you're keeping up with the emerging threats. You want to train your staff. You want to maintain backups, least privileged access, and logging and monitoring. You train your staff to make sure that they don't fall victim to social engineering. And then the maintaining backups, least privilege, and access, logging and monitoring, those things will help prevent expanded blast radius for breaches. You don't want to have accounts that we don't have visibility on and accounts that have too much access. And then once you guys are down, we want to be able to back you up and get you back online quickly. And then we want you guys to maintain updated copies of your incident response plan and your business continuity plan. In the event that something like this happens, you guys are prepared and know exactly what to do and where to look for your resolutions. We have the Q&A open. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. Thank you guys for registering for today's webinar. We have a free cyber readiness report promotion going on, and you will be able to find our webinars available on YouTube once they are uploaded. Thank you guys for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to Mel or myself. We'll be happy to answer any concerns that you might have for your organization. Thank you.